Hi, all. Good afternoon. Welcome to GWFM webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out. Today being Friday. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Adil with us. Adil has been a known person in the market. If you don't know him, probably you can Google through and see that he has been one of the thought leaders. It's really fortunate to have him today with us as a thought leader. I'm sure that you're going to have a great time learning and also listening to him. And Adil is currently a CEO of Banquet Business Management company called FiRM. Adil holds bachelor's degree in commerce and law, and he's from Tata Institute of Management. Is rank holder from TIS. Most of us know, and an honorary a doctorate in philosophy, and winner of several national and international awards. In fact, Adil has worked more than 40 years. Adil is now 59. He looks so young than anyone of us, and I appreciate his energy and kind of enthusiasm. Adil has worked well-known companies like Godrej, GE Appliance, AI, AI for time, Marcus and Spencers, Coca-Cola, and Acer in India, Middle East, and US. Adil is a voracious reader and writer, and he has been social media enthusiast. And Adil has been a keynote speaker in a lot of professional forums in India and also worldwide. And in fact, he's an enthusiast, music enthusiast, plays the Mohan Veena. And recently, in television interviews, the interviewer asked him that what is the secret of success? He said, first, learn to be a good human being. Everything else follows, which is most important thing. Most of us, whatever level that we are in, we lack this. In fact, and very well said, as far as secret of success means what. Today, Adil is going to take us through a fantastic topic about talent edge and what is new, right? And then it's really a great opportunity for us to host Adil under GWFM webinar series. Thank you so much for joining, and we're going to have a great time. We will have a question and answer series at the end. You have a and sign here, where you can click on the hand if you want to ask any questions at the last. And I'll just unmute you so that you can ask question to Adil, and Adil will answer your questions. So with this, I hand over the control to Adil. Adil, it's a pleasure having you with us today at the GWFM webinar series. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Pleasure is mine. And this part of whatever introduction you gave, I've taped it so that I can play it to my wife, because sometimes she refuses to accept that, whatever nice things you spoke about me. So thank you very much for giving me such a nice introduction. Whilst we will spend our time on trying to talk about how do people, leaders, and organizations end up creating a talent edge, we are going to cover the entire webinar in kind of 4 subparts. And I would suggest, and of course I will leave it to you to decide, but I would certainly suggest that if there are questions coming up, of course you can ask at any point of time, but particularly after the section is over, you could certainly ask me questions so that, consolidatedly we could handle all the issues that may come up at that point of time. From a housekeeping perspective, I hope you're able to read the slides which are there, because there is a set of around 5 slides that we have created. So I hope you're able to read it. And if any which ways you're not able to read it, I'll be talking about it. Should you require the slide deck at a later point of time, do not hesitate to let me know or let Shiva know, and we will ensure that you get the same. So with that in mind, let me also in advance, wish you a happy Dhanteras. Today, India celebrates Dhanteras, which is a very important Hindu festival. And I think that the criticality of doing this seminar today is the fact that I seriously believe that talent is the source from where all wealth really gets created. And if we are really praying for successes and prosperity, the real prosperity creator, of course, is the God, the creator, but of course, on the earth level, talent and people are the real creators of wealth. And therefore, today is possibly the right day when we should be talking about how leaders and organizations create a talent edge. Now, the first set of thoughts that I wanted to share with you is that in this world where we are talking about success in digital times and coming forward, what do leaders, what do organizations really need to be doing to be able to create successful organizations and successful companies? Is number one, I genuinely believe that they should be working towards developing blended leadership. And when they want to create blended leadership, this blended leadership is required to create value in a situation where the people he's dealing with are having cognitive dissonance and conflicting dissonance. Now, it sounds slightly complicating, but let me demystify this whole concept to you. So first of all, the purpose of organization is to create value. And I think that is very clear. That does not need any explanation. And we in the organization, the questions that have always been asked to me is, what kind of leadership is required in organizations? And particularly we human resources people, when we get into competencies and what kind of competencies are required by leaders to succeed, if you take down the list given by various organizations and various thinkers and leaders, you will come to across 1,000 such competencies if you really ask me as to which are the competencies at different points of time, different people have said are the competencies that leaders need to have. Can one person have all of these competencies? Because if you really look at it, all these competencies which we talk about, and clearly clusters of around 21 competencies, are all leaders really supposed to be masters of all these 21 competencies? Can we find in this world one person who's a master of all these competencies? So the question is, if he is not, then how does he end up leading an organization? So the question always is that, you may have, and each one of us has got internal strengths, particularly in certain competencies, we are born with natural strengths, which we keep reflecting at all points of time. So as leaders, we need to be mindful of all the competencies that are required, but an effective leader is one who is able to identify a set of people in his organizations who are able to complement him with those other competency sets which he does not bring as a strength. So he brings in certain critical strengths, but the wisdom is that he also knows that there are other people who need to be in the organization with those other competencies, and he's able to assimilate a team of people with all these other competencies so that collectively the value creation journey can be fulfilled. So at every point of time, bear it in mind, whatever we are discussing is that the journey of creating a talent edge comes from all that we are talking. And one of the most important we are talking about is the talent edge comes from the fact whether you yourself bring in that additional edge or not. And then are you wise enough to be able to identify which are the skill gaps or competency gaps that you have in the organization, as a consequence of which, how do you assimilate a team in your organization which has the balance so that the entire team has a blended leadership. So the blended leadership is the model that we will use to say the entire set of competencies required to create value. You as a leader bring some, but you as a leader bring wisdom to know what is missing and assimilating the team so that the entire blended set of competencies are available for value creation. Now, as you go around creating value with your team, there are two kinds of situations that you are going to always face. The first is a situation of what we call cognitive dissonance. And the second is a conflict which we call is a conflicting dissonance. Now, when you go around fulfilling the purpose which you have identified or what you may have defined in your organization as a vision, sometimes there is this cognitive dissonance which comes into your mind. Now, what is cognitive dissonance? Those who have been students of psychology will know that a human being may believe one thing, but his behaviors may be different than what his belief is. And that is a state of cognitive dissonance. So there is a dissonance between what he believes and what he ends up doing. So why is it that all leaders, if you were to give an academic paper to them about what is good leadership, they will all be able to give you academically correct answers of what good leaders are and who good leaders can become and what are the things good leaders do. Then when it comes to the grassroots level of the practices they indulge in, you will somehow find all these so-called guys, everyone has studied management from the same sets of books, from the same sets of colleges, and yet there are some who are able to, at the grassroots level, on the breathing track of the organization, where leadership has to be reflected, they are able to reflect correct behaviors versus some other people who may know academically what is leadership about, and yet when it comes to executing those skills, they exactly do the opposite. Now, that is a dissonance between the behaviors and what their attitudes are versus what their thoughts and beliefs are. And this creates a dissonance. Generally, in the domain of talent management, we find that these dissonances are of the highest level, and therefore one of the way in which a leader can really control this is by creating an edge and creating a kind of congeniality between his entire cognitive understanding of the subject so that there's no dissonance. On the other end, there is a conflicting dissonance also. So when an individual is managing, he has more to cope with his cognitive dissonance. But when the leadership team is trying to achieve the purpose, there is going to be differences in opinions, differences in beliefs. Though they all want to achieve a common purpose, they still have differences in the way and the approach and the styles they want to adopt. And therefore, different people may have different ways in which they may want to fulfill the purpose. And that brings to a state of conflicting dissonance. So when it comes to organizations' value creation or any other domains of the organization where groups of people are working, one of the best way or one of the most required action is to ensure that there is a cognitive coming together instead of dissonance, and the conflicts are also resolved and there is no conflicting dissonance. All right, so that is very, very important, that all attitudes, behaviors, etc. are all in line with the actions and behaviors of the people, so that collectively they have a common set of thinkings on what they need to do to fulfill the purpose of the organization. So this is the first set of first set of cognitive consistency that we need to bring into the organization as individual and collective as a team, particularly when we are dealing with a very, very sensitive, emotional kind of a resource called people. And people are not really mechanical, so you cannot come to one conclusion, particularly when you're dealing with that subject with leaders who are also human beings, who have also got conflicting situations. This becomes the most criticality in trying to provide the talent edge. So this is the first set of thoughts that I wanted to share with you. If anyone has any questions on this, you may please ask me. And how will we indicate that there are questions that we want to deal?
Adil, I'll be able to make out, and if there are any hands raised, I can unmute them.
So is there any question, or should we go to the second segment, or how do you want to do it?
No hands as of now. I think we can continue.
Very good. So either they have understood it clearly or they are totally confused, but whichever way, we will wait for the hands to come up maybe later on. Now, the second issue that I want to take it up for discussion at this point of time is, why does talent require an edge? Now, if you take a look at a knife, for example, a knife is basically a piece of metal. And that piece of metal can be used generally for spreading. Each one of us must be using, say, a knife on the breakfast table, and you use the knife to maybe spread cheese or spread butter or spread something on your toast. But the knife also, as we know, has a critical use of cutting. Now, the cutting edge of a knife is not more than 5% of the metal versus the spreading edge of the knife is 95%. So, though the critical element of a knife of cutting is fulfilled only by 5% of the edge that it has, if it does not have that edge, it cannot fulfill the purpose. So the 5% represents the majority of what the delivery of that entire task is about. Now, how has life happened in the human resources? If you track back a little bit over a period of time and understand what has been happening, over a period of time, the function began calling itself the personnel departments or the personnel people. Then over a period of time, they became the employee relations people. Thereafter, they ended up becoming personnel departments. Then they re-christian themselves to call themselves human resources function. And after human resources function, now they have started calling them the talent function. The general belief in the domain has been that just by changing and shifting names or putting names to departments which sounded very fashionable with the prevailing literature on the theme, they were really doing anything very critical. So they call the same sets of people personnel people. They used to call them at one point of time the HR people. Now we call them the talent people. And we believe that by renaming the departments and using the same stock to be named differently, we are doing some different things. And that is where the blunder of the entire talent management goes, because people are now using talent as a terminology interchangeably with personnel and HR. So whenever we want to make reference to people or HR, we want to use the word talent. And that is where the confusion comes, because the criticality of talent begins with the prime source of differentiation. If we cannot differentiate and want to treat everybody in one broad brush of a common reference, then we cannot do it. So what therefore is the difference between people and talent is what we need to understand in the first instance. Now, people are the entire set of resources, which are human resources that an organization happens, and we have them with an intention to use their collective knowledge, skills, attitudes to create organizational wealth or organizational value. Now, talent is that differentiated part of human resources, or the differentiated part of the people who are working in their organization, who are able to add distinctly different higher ordered value as compared to the others. So everyone can add value, everyone brings in skills, everyone brings in attitudes, everyone brings in everything that is required, but a certain set of people within the organization are able to offer differentiated value. They are able to do different things which generally all cannot do. They are able to do maybe at their levels assignments, jobs which are at levels much higher or done by people with many more years of experience, or bring in a unique insight or bring in a unique way of doing it which ends up saving a lot of money for the organization, or are unique thinkers and therefore their ability to think on the subject is totally different. It is only when they bring those differentiated characteristics, those differentiated value, that people or human resources then end up becoming talent. So if you start referring to the entire universe of people who are working in the organization as talent, you will never be able to understand what they do differently. Therefore, you will never be able to offer differentiated rewards. Therefore, you will never be able to offer them differentiated assignments. You will never be able to understand their requirements differently. You will never be able to bespoke their offerings, as a consequence of which this talent will be lost to you, because when differentiated talent is dealt with in a generality, then it does not believe that it is recognized, and when talent is not recognized, it attrites from the enterprise or dulls its edge. So two things happen when we are not able to differentiate talent from people. One is talent gets frustrated, and second is then talent, when it is frustrated, it does two things. Either number one, it decides to attrite from the organization and find itself a space somewhere else where it will get recognition, or number two, over a period of time, it realizes that it is not being valued, so ends up getting dulled, and therefore the sharp edge of the knife or sharp edge of talent, which is very valuable and critical for the enterprise, ends up becoming the dull end and blends itself with the larger spreading edge of the knife, and therefore it loses its advantage. So any organization that really believes that it values talent will have to first of all put in programs where they are able to critically identify through processes what first of all they understand by talent, and by virtue of that understanding of talent, are they able to differentiate the talented from the not so talented? Are they able to differentiate the men from the boys, the real critical successful value generators from the others who are really adding to the work of the organization, doing things for the organization, but not the differentiated work which we want to call as talent? So this is very, very important. Ability to add differentiated value is what is very critical. They should be able to indicate that they can strategically lead the organization to its destination that it wants to lead. And the second set of talented people also should have competencies where they should have what we call critical thinking skills. So number one is they should be having strategic skill sets, and the second is they should be having critical skill sets. Strategic skill sets enable the talented people to help the organization move from their current destinations to their desired destination. So desired destination is defined as the vision. So they help either in their leadership roles or in their team contributions, the organization to move from their current level to their desired level. The second set of skills that they need to have are more critical in today's points of time, particularly in the kind of VUCA times when we are not able to understand, when things are not really repetitive as they used to be in the past. New situations are happening, new challenges emerge, your old tools are not working, your strategies are failing, resources which were available are no longer available, new competition has come up. At this point of time, when the business loses its ability to create value in the same old way that it was doing, because of all these changes, critical thinkers who are talented people are able to think on their feet to say that if these kind of criticalities or challenges are being coming to us as an organization, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to keep the morale high? What do we need to do to ensure that we experiment? What do we need to do to make people believe in the organization's commitment? How do we ensure that the value systems don't get broken down? Because whenever the businesses don't get resolved, the first thing they want to do is start indulging in practices which are not necessarily practices of integrity. So how do they ensure that the values and the vision of the organization continues to be the same despite of the criticality, and they move in the direction of the organizational success? And that is very critical. So what we call talent is they should be able to do differentiated things. They should have certain strategic skills where they are able to make the organization move in the direction of their vision, and therefore be playing supportive roles and leadership roles which are strategic. And the third is that in moments like crisis and moments of adversity, they are not faint-hearted guys who will get heart attacks. They are strong people. They are people who can inspire the other people. They are people who will be able to talk to the other people and ensure that their belief in the organization, the belief in the organization's purpose, the belief in the value of the organization is sustained, and therefore they have critical skills along with the strategic skills. And that is what you call talent. So critical talent should be differentiated on the basis of its strategic skills and critical skills. And once it is segregated or identified on the basis of its differentiated contributions, we need to put in programs to be able to recognize and further develop them such that the ultimate leadership of the organization comprises of these people who are talented people with the differentiated skill sets. Now that is what brings us to the second segment closure. How are we doing on the questions, Shiv? Hi.
Yeah,
Shiv,
yeah, Adil,
how are we doing?
we can take questions at the last.
I can. If there are no questions, we will do that. But in case there are questions, because segment to segment, if there are questions, the learning process becomes more engaging.
Hi, all. You have any questions in this particular section? If you have any questions, there's one icon, and icon is there, so you can just click on that. I'll be able to unmute you. Any questions? So for no questions, Adil, I think we can proceed.
All right, fair enough. So now we go to the third segment of the whole thing. And in the third segment, I want to talk about, well, this what we have already spoken is about how talent is very critical at all points of time, whether it is the digital world that we will be going in, or when we move from the knowledge world into the information era, how it happened. So the criticality of talent at all points of time continued to be what I was telling you. I want to take this time to, bring on table certain very tectonic transitions which we see happening, and what are these major tectonic transitions which are happening in the industry. And these industries, these tectonic transactions have to be brought on stock, because then once we identify our talent people, we should be able to put these talented people on those assignments. One of the greatest blunders that organizations I've seen them doing is they call people talent, even if for a minute, let us presume that they have identified the correct talent. The most talented people in the organization are handling jobs which are not really critically contributing to the enterprise success. So you have the most talented people working on assignments which seem to be more of sound and effect, but not necessarily contributing to the value creation journey of the enterprise. And those who are really and significantly supposed to be creating value are not the people that they have identified as talent. So there is this gross mismatch of, are we allocating the people we identify as talent and putting them to solve the biggest problems of the organization, or are we identifying them and putting them into jobs which are predominantly only sound and glorification jobs, which look nice but do not necessarily solve or do not necessarily be handling the most critical problems of the enterprise. Number one, we said identifying talent. Number two, we are saying is placing the talent where the greatest problem of the organizations are, and that is one of the ways in which organizations do this. Now, one of the many tectonic changes that are happening is that when we, and I don't want to get into VUCA world, and it is such an overspoken subject that sometimes people, when they talk VUCA, I feel very nauseatic about it, and I don't want to talk about it because it's such an overspoken subject. But what one sees happening is that whilst these changes are happening, organizations have not gone and predominantly remodel their business models. So they continue with the same business model under the belief that some small changes they make here and there is what will help them to tide over these major tectonic changes which are happening. Let us understand that tectonic changes are not small changes. They are huge changes in the plate of the earth which changes the entire shape. They are things which cause earthquakes. These are not small vibrations. But when you make those small adjustments in the company only under the belief that those small changes will actually bring about your response to those tectonic changes, then it is trying to put a band-aid on a major accident that has happened to a person. And when the bleeding is not stopping, you're trying to stop that bleeding with the help of a band-aid, and naturally it is not going to stop, and it's going to at some point of time cause disaster. So one of the most important things is that organizations need to be modeling themselves differently to be able to readjust to this entire technological impact on the tectonic changes which are happening in the industry. Now, therefore, if that is so the case, one of the ways in which organizations can create a talent edge is by identifying what are the new business models that they need to adjust themselves to instead of continuing their old business models. And in that, what are the skill sets required? Because these are the new wave skill sets required. And therefore, how do we identify people who have those skill sets and bring them on the table so that they would be able to guide the enterprise solutions towards that? Imagine you call someone talent in your organization and they are digitally challenged to be able to face the challenges of the digital times. So you have people who are, and one of the major problems I have with organizations is that those people at the top who are today supposed to be in charge of the funding of the organization and budgets and money of the organization so that they decide what the company should be doing in future are themselves digitally challenged. Now, if they are digitally challenged on the one hand, but they are managing funds of the organization on the other hand, or the strategy of the future of the organization on the other hand, now you have a challenge because they are digitally challenged. They don't understand the challenge that is facing them, and they have the money control, and therefore the two allocations don't happen in line. Therefore, talent is that which has to change its definition with the changing times. That one of the domains is that the technological impact has to have people who are competent from a technological perspective to lead that challenge. So that is one of the most important tectonic changes which is happening. The second change that we see happening, and we are talking all about it, but I don't really see very meaningful things being done, is the emergence of artificial intelligence, big data analysis, and consumer and talent intelligence. So many times we continue in our organizations to keep doing the same old Excel-based data management, whilst we keep saying, and we believe that academically we appreciate the criticality of artificial intelligence and its ability to do big data analysis, on the basis of which we believe we should be able to do predictive analysis and all of that. When it comes to managing either our customers or it comes to managing our talent, we are not using any of these so-called new wave tools. And therefore, if talent edge is to be created, first of all, we need to have the most clear data about who is talent in our organization, who has been engaging and talking to these people. Do we really understand what are their insights? Do we really understand them? Or are they just a set of senior people who are sitting out there making a presumption which is very bipolar? We wanted it this way, these guys want it this way. We wanted long-term incentives, millennials want short-term incentives. We like provident funds, they like cash in hand. So those kinds of macro homilies that leadership tries to sit together and imagine as to what the millennials want without actually doing grassroots level research is a problem that we have, because talent is not going to be satisfied by these kind of homilies and programs that the HR departments drive on the basis of this unscientific research that we have done. So one of the ways in which organization can create talent edge is to use contemporary tools. First of all, I genuinely believe organizations need to have sound ERPs. So if you do not have ERPs, or if you're still working on these bolt-on applications that you have on ERPs, it's not going to help you. If you have to manage your talent very effectively, you will require a very solid talent ERP or a HR ERP, of which talent has to be a critical module. Why do you need that module? Because you need to understand the insights of talents in all its dimensions. And that is possible only if you have the total data of the master data and the behavioral data of talent. What does talent want? Can you imagine we offer them incentive programs which they don't want, and therefore we say, why do our incentive programs don't work? Incentive programs don't work because predominantly they are not designed on the basis of the insights of the people that they are supposed to incentivize. In fact, I was recently writing on one of my LinkedIn posts that most companies we go into when we go into our consulting assignments say that their retention programs are ineffective. Yes, retention programs are ineffective because we try to create walls which are higher and higher so that the kangaroo cannot jump out of the wall. But we do not ask the kangaroo how it is succeeding in jumping every wall which is increased, because the kangaroo will tell you that there is a back door which did forget to shut in the night, and it comes out not from jumping, but it comes out from the back door which is not closed. Which is to say that organizations keep throwing money at their problem under the belief that we will offer money and that's what they want. But the actual thing that the millennials may want is totally different. And therefore, unless and until we have total insights into what the talent wants in the organization, and unless we have a grip, unless we talk to them, unless we engage with them, unless we continue to connect with them, we will not have any programs which we call evidence-based. We today in HR departments have lost credibilities at times. Whenever we have lost is from the fact that organizations do HR programs which are not what we call evidence-based HR departments. We do programs based on gut feelings. We do programs because some boss somewhere believes that he heard a program presentation somewhere and it worked in a certain organization, so we want to believe that it will work in the other organization, so why don't we also do it? So with that kind of data, which is not necessarily insight-driven data or research-driven data, we design our programs. And when we design programs on that, they naturally do not give us results. And when we don't give results, they will say HR department is useless. They told us to put money in this program and the program doesn't work. But if you had your data, particularly of your talented data, then your ability to design programs, benefits, what kind of assignments they are looking for, would all be in line with the insights of talent. So therefore, it is very, very important that organizations should have those kind of ERPs which will throw them this very important thing. And so therefore the second tectonic change was this artificial intelligence using of future tools which we don't do, which have started impacting because the expectation of talent is to that end. And the third we spoke about is evidence-based HR. We have been doing HR on the gut feel, on basis of what someone has told someone, or what we go into the presentations and see presentations. We see some companies coming and making those fancy glitzy presentations on the stage, and we believe, oh my God, that is a great program to go because it has a lot of sound and effect and thunder, but it may not have effect. But we want to do it because it will make us look good in the contemporary domain of our professionals. That is one of the things. We do not do anything predictive. Today, every organization is seeking predictive analysis, which means that we want to find out that what kinds of people and what kind of culture is going to succeed. Now, we have no clue about the people who have in the past succeeded to be heroes or role models in the company. We have not identified the role models, but we want to sit in selection processes when we are acquiring talent without any reference to the role models who have succeeded in doing the assignments in the culture of that organization. Therefore, what we really need to do is to develop a predictable model when we are acquiring talent to be able, with reasonable element of success, be able to identify who will succeed and who will not succeed in delivering the desirable results in the culture of the enterprise that we are having. Therefore, we need to do is to sit with our bosses, identify for each role which are the 2 or 3 people, current, past, present, who have done those roles effectively, understand what is it that they did right, and develop mechanisms along with the new technology to be able to identify and predict when we are looking at talent, whether that talent will be able to deliver the desired goals that we want to hire them for. So therefore, we do not have data of the past. We do not want to use tools of the future. And we want to continue what we have been doing for all these years. And we say, why is it not working? I think that's a no-brainer. And I don't think we require real great intelligence or prize for guessing why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because we have no data of the past. It doesn't work because we have no idea of what future requirements are, and therefore we don't link the two, and therefore we end up failing. One of the reasons or the tectonic change which we see happening is the changes moving in a direction where the culture is in direct confrontation with the changes that are required. Now, let us understand one thing about culture, and even culture is a subject that has been written so much that everyone is a culture expert. But what emerges over a period of time, that culture is absolutely about rigidity. Culture is something which does not. Culture is an echo box. So anyone who is echoing the existing and the prevailing practices of the enterprise in the way things happen or the way life moves in that particular organization, collectively put together, all those processes define the culture of the enterprise, how things get done in this enterprise. But predominantly culture is very rigid, because the moment you want to do something different than how the culture of the enterprise was doing it in the past, then the entire forces of loyalty in the organization gang up against the person or a set of people who want to do it differently and label it as disloyalty to the culture. So when the world is changing, when the tectonic changes in the world necessitate people to be doing things which are far more different, culture acts as a rigid deterrent, not allowing them to do, because the forces of loyalty, which predominantly are those who want to protect their power centers, along with the leaders of the past, gang up together to block the people who want to do the new things in the new way and a different way as disloyal to the organization. So rigid cultures predominantly end up suffocating leadership, and therefore, how do we get talent which does not necessarily only confront, but is able to use reverse mentoring, which is one of the most important drivers of success, reverse mentoring. And how does it use reverse mentoring to bring about a change in the old culture to start then believing? Now, we had put a reverse mentoring program, and what we saw, and I should tell you this, a 70-year CEO of one of our steel businesses learned how to play guitar from a 25-year-old IIM graduate, because we had said that if you want to mentor him into understanding how steel has to be made, you will have to commit yourself to learning one thing which you do not know and which he can teach you. So we began with that, and of course, it ended up to him learning how to play guitar at his old age, and he was sporting enough to learn it. But what was important is that that led to him learning a lot of applications of software which he was otherwise not wanting to use. So therefore, that is talent that is able to influence even the existing people, to make them realize, not by saying I'm going to disobey you, but by convincing them that there is a new way of looking at it. And therefore organizations thrive when they identify this kind of talent which uses facilitative skills, influencing skills. And when we talk about influencing skills, we only have the leader influencing the team members, versus inspirational potential talent of the future has unique ability to influence even the top leadership to be thinking differently. And that is what is the talent edge. So how do we create that talent edge in the organization is very, very important. Emotional intelligence, very, very critical, because leaders of the future cannot thrive the way leaders of the past who have worked and succeeded in a power structured organization work. Earlier, if you knew the subject well and if you were on the good terms with boss, you certainly got into certain powerful positions over a period of time. And whether you had emotional intelligence or not did not really matter, because you had the ears and the eyes of the boss. And of course, technically you were sound to do the job that was there, so you became the most powerful leader. Everyone else had to fall at your feet. Maybe on Sunday go and buy vegetables for your wife at home or whatever it was. But that model of leadership is not going to thrive, and we all know the criticality, particularly the millennials and the desire for emotional intelligence In fact, if you really look at it, the direction of economic research that is going on in the world is linking emotional intelligence into what is understood as behavioral economics. Now, with the emergence of behavioral economics, it becomes very important that not only your consumers and customers, but your internal employees are also driven by programs which HR departments design, which are based on behavioral economics. And therefore, data, as we told you, is very important. Connecting with people, the strategy and the goal and what they are doing is very, very important. And the last most important thing is, do we engage people? Do they feel motivated to do it? Because the most important thing that most of the new generation of millennials are coming is that they have got a mind of their own. They know the directions, and particularly the gig economy, where people don't want to do those long 30 years old jobs which fuddy-duddies ever did. They want to do assignments for a fixed period of time. They are very, very clear about their work-life balance. They are very clear about what they want to achieve, and it is not necessarily what your father or you may have wanted to achieve. And therefore, in that kind of a milieu, when the gig economy is going to operate, where people are going to work for 5 years and then they want to take a 3-year break and do something on their own, and then again come and do some 2 years work and things like that. Now, with that kind of change, how are you going to look at your business model, your culture, your networking organization structures differently becomes a critical challenge. And you as a leader are mandated to find bespoke alternatives, not imitated alternatives. Because it's very easy to say, for example, listen to a presentation of, say, a Tata Consulting company and say, okay, look, this is what they are doing, so we will do that. But that is imitation. Imitation, because the diagnosis made by one organization is not necessarily the diagnosis you're making for yourself. So you need to make a diagnosis of what your problems are and bring in the interventions and programs to find solutions on the basis of that. And that is very important. Behavioral intelligence is critical, adversity management is critical, and what is emerging as surprisingly more critical to the millennials and the new generations of people that we are talking about is their desire for governance, their desire for fairness, their desire for the planet and the protection of environment, and their commitment to all of that appears to be much more than what the previous generations believed. Whilst the previous generations have been stressing that they did this and the new ones don't care, my experiences are that we have a very, very positive set of people. To that extent, we have done a great job in nurturing these new people who are coming into the industry. And they are more protective of the environment. They are more desirous of fairness in organization. They are more desirous of fulfilling their social responsibilities than what the previous generations were. Now, when these paradigms are changing, what do you really want organizations to do? Should they be just watching? Should they be what should they be doing? All right, so they must be doing something. They have to respond to these tectonic changes. So for ease of reference, and so that you will remember, and not, this is nothing to do with my hubris on the subject, I have created an acronym which you will be able to remember. And that acronym goes with my name. So it's, again, as I said, not about my hubris, but convenience for you to remember. The acronym is ADIL. A is agility. D is driving passionately. I is innovation. And L is learning. Now, why do we say agility? Because there are chances that when these tectonic changes are happening, either you are sleeping like Rip Van Winkle and you do not realize that these changes have happened, and maybe 20 years later when you will wake up, you will realize that these changes have happened, by which time it is too late for you to take any action. So number one is, unless and until your antennas are on and you know what are the changes that are happening, you feel the tremors of change happening, you will not make these changes. But just feeling the tremors will not help you. You will have to be agile. You will have to be someone who says the ground is shaking, the earth is shaking. What do we need to do to be able to move to the next higher destination? Otherwise, if we continue to stand where we are standing, chances of our getting destroyed are very high. So therefore, organizations need to be agile, which means that they have to be alert at all points of time and desirous of moving from, without getting startled about the destruction, to say, if this destruction is going to be happening, how do we move to the next higher level? How do we continue in our journey without getting destroyed? That's agility. D is driving passionately. And I genuinely believe that till there is passion, there is no achievement. And because unless there is passion, when this destruction happens, you will not do anything. But when there is passion for the goal, when there is passion for the purpose, when there is passion for you to deliver what you have set as your target to deliver, it will mean there is a higher level of resilience. It means that you will ensure for continuity. It means that you will do everything. You will work very hard. You will have resilience. You will not accept destruction. If destruction happens, you will regenerate everything, because you are passionate about the purpose, and that passion is going to make you do the right things which will help the organization succeed. So number one is the change environment. First is agility. Second is drive passionately. The third is innovation. And why is innovation important? Innovation is important because in the changed world, nothing that you have done in the past is going to find its application, because the paradigm has changed. And when the paradigm changes, everything changes. All the rules, regulations, principles, programs, projects, whichever word, need to be revalidated. Some of them may continue, but to presume that the same thing will be applicable in the future would be like living in a fool's paradigm. And therefore, when paradigm changes, everything becomes zero and therefore needs to be revalidated to determine whether they will continue in the future or not. If that is the situation, none of the old things that you were doing will automatically continue to apply. Lot many things you did in the past will fail. Therefore, because the situation is so new, you will have to learn to be innovative. You will have to find different linkages. You will have to be creative. You will have to be experimentative by nature. And one of the most important, and which is why today, if you will go through any learning agenda of any company, design thinking becomes one of the most important programs which organizations use as intervention in the change transformation journey. And which is very critical, because if we are talking about tectonic changes having impacted organizations, they will have to go to ground zero and do a lot of design thinking to be able to determine how, in the changed tectonic environment, what needs to be changed. Otherwise, you will sit and do tinkering around with the old programs, they will not give you results. And therefore, design thinking, zero-based thinking, zero ground thinking, ground-up thinking are the programs which will be the ones you drive. And that comes from the fact that being innovative is being cutting edge, and therefore talent should be able to innovate new solutions. Old minds cannot really think new solutions. You will have to get cutting edge new talent to be able to think innovatively about the problems. Where comes the L? So we said number one, agility. Number two, driving passionately. Number three, innovation. And number four, L stands for learning. There is nothing in the world which can substitute learning, because the entire process of change that is happening is talking about continuously building newer capabilities if you have to thrive and succeed in the future. The knowledge that we have is outdating itself at such a fast pace that by the time you realize that knowledge has changed, new knowledge has already come and substituted it. And by the time you believe if that is the new knowledge and you believe that that's what you're going to learn, you've got to be ready with the fact that there is yet another new knowledge or new invention which is coming in, which is going to be changing even that new invention which you believed was the new one when you were working on the old ones. That is the pace at which knowledge is changing, therefore capabilities have to be built for that. And if your mind is a non-learning mind, you will never be able to thrive. So if there's one capability each one of us, and I'm not saying each one of you, including myself, because even my knowledge gets outdated itself, unless and until I upgrade it, unless and until I continue reading regularly, unless and until I listen, think, mix with the young people to understand how their minds work, we will never be able to be in a learning mindset, as a consequence of which we will be trying to fight wars of the new world with weapons of the previous wars. And this is a losing formula, doesn't work for me. You cannot get into a war with the artillery map of the previous war, because you will be lost like crazy. Imagine this, we lived in a world of answers. Teachers would ask questions and we would have to give them answers. The entire paradigm has changed. The entire learning paradigm has changed. Here, Google has all the answers. You should know which is the right question to ask. Therefore, knowing the answer is not really the success. Knowing where the information lies and what is the question to be asked is the most important driver of change. Therefore, the changing learning model is changing. You have to be learning in new ways. It's a continuous process. It is linked to capability building, and therefore only those who are continuing to be learners will thrive in the changing environment. So before I come to the last segment, I wanted to know how are we doing on things. Are there any questions? How are we doing on time?
We are good as far as time is concerned, Adil.
Are we doing good on time?
Yes.
That's nice.
I,
So let us come then.
Do you have any questions? Any questions at this point in time? You can raise your hand there. You can find hand icon over there. You can click on that if you have any questions. All right, I don't see any questions, Adil. I think we can proceed.
All right, so now I come to the last segment. We spoke about the three segments. Then the last is, so how do we do it? Now the question is, okay, wise man, someone will tell me, okay, wise man, you seem to be knowing all the problems we have. You're talking about the tectonic changes which are happening in the world. You seem to be knowing this, you need to be showing that. Tell me, what is it that now I should go back from this webinar thinking, what is it that I as an HR man, when I come back from Diwali, should I be thinking differently? How do I start sharpening the talent edge in my enterprise? And that's the question you have. Of course, number one is you have to be creative. So I'm the last guy who believes that I can give you a formula on the basis of which if you start putting that formula in your enterprise, you'll find all the solutions. That is never the purpose. That's never the reality. So let's look at my belief. And, as I've always told, and I've written about it, and my book, which is coming out, is also writing on that. Any HR manager anywhere in the universe, when he's doing his HR job, does only what we call the 7G jobs. Familiar sounding, but let me repeat it for the benefit of those who are uninitiated. What are these 7Gs that HR department does? Number one, get. Number two, give. Number three, grow. Number four, guide, govern, germinate. Get, give, grow, guide, govern, and germinate. These are the 7Gs. Now, those continue to be the delivery of leadership, and particularly human resources departments have to deliver these 7Gs at any point of time, whichever domain you go in, whether it was the Stone Age HR manager, or whether it was the Iron Age HR manager, or whether it was the information knowledge-based HR manager, or whether it is going to be digital age, or whichever age follows that. Now, the question remaining is that if HR has to do this get, give, grow, guide, govern, and germinate jobs, how is what we are talking about using these tools to determine the insights and do the right things, what do we need to do differently? So now, number one is, how are we first of all going to look at the structure of the organization differently? Are we wanting to, if we don't change the business model, we are going to be in a state of doom. So we said that number one, with these kind of tectonic changes which are happening in the universe, organizations' business models will have to be changed. And if organizations' business models have to be changed, no longer will organizations be able to drive their operations and activities on the basis of the old organization structures we have created. Technology now helps us to grow fast. Technology helps us to break through boundaries. Technology changes the ownership models. You don't need to be an owner of all the assets which are required to create business. There are multiple ways in which it can be done. So the question coming is that when the tectonic changes are necessitating businesses to have a different business model, necessitates that for HR department to start thinking, do we really need to be thinking about our business organization structure differently, or should we just continue building those pyramids, sit in a room, make 3-4 alternative charts with boxes and lines here and there, and go to the boss, use his logic, explain your logic, and that's how you freeze the organization structure. So therefore, it is very, very important for every organization or every HR manager to determine the organization chart as the first domain in which you need to work in light of what we have said. The second thing that we need to do is, how do we acquire talent? Most advice, everyone is talking about different ways in which we are doing, and some organizations are indeed practicing newer ways. Are you aware of the fact today that the best of the CVs that you are looking out for are no longer available on LinkedIn? First of all, let me accept that most of them are not even using LinkedIn. Only 20% organizations use LinkedIn as talent acquisition source. But suppose you are using that, you should be mindful of the fact that most beautiful CVs are today available on Instagram. And most people who are not aware are actually searching for mangoes on an apple tree. So it is very, very important what for your requirement are the correct sources, and where do you pick up from? How do you go around? Do you really just immediately when your boss says there's a vacancy, give a call into one of the recruiting agencies or headhunting agencies and say, my job is over, I've already told you this is the job description, which is of course 20 years old. This is the job description, I'm giving it to you, can you please get me a person, and this is the compensation program, and when my boss asks what is happening, I will certainly say I've given this mandate to this agency. No longer is that solution going to be working for you. So how are we in the changed tectonic environment going to be able to, in a gig economy, identify the person through the new tools where we will be able to predict what is the kind of person who will succeed in our organization? How are we going to acquire that talent? I cannot give you an answer. I can give you the direction. You will have to understand your organization and bespoke that direction for yourself. So number one, organization structure start looking differently. What can be outsourced has to be seen. You don't need to go through the classical employment or contract labor alternatives. There are multiple alternatives now available. Have you explored the opportunity to look at those millennial opportunities that you have on how to recruit and man your organization? Have you explored all of that, or are you still working on the old models with one or two alternatives that you want to go in for? Number two is, are we really using the correct mechanisms and the correct competency assessments? Are we really acquiring talent through the fastest and the best sources, or do we continue using the old sources? Continue using your old sources at your own peril. You may succeed once in a while, but not long, because this is still a transition period, so you may succeed. But once it clearly moves away into the new structure, the old mechanisms which may have 20% effect will also not continue to apply, and you will fail in that. How do we design our compensation programs? No longer can an entire organization have a program that for grade 1, this is the fixed percentage of variable, these are the benefits, these benefits up to this amount is given to one grade, this benefit up to next amount is given to the next grade, the classical way in which an entire compensation program is made. None of it is bespoke. Now we are getting into a universe where everything is going to be, if you really want to succeed in getting the best talent in the organization or the critical talent in the organization, you will have to learn to bespoke your benefit programs. If you want to give your talent an edge, you will have to reinforce it by rewards and compensation which are bespoke to his requirement. No longer is money the only attractive thing, which up to the last 2 decades it was the most important attraction that people had. And therefore, you will have to find out what is the way that people get excited. How can I excite them with the value propositions we have? Most organizations theoretically understand and appreciate value propositions. But when we ask them to identify and tell us what is your value propositions, most of them are not able to pay. Everyone says we are equal opportunity employer. Everyone says that we are a fair organization. Every organization says we have very strong career management program. And most people who attract, or you go to Glassdoor and read about those organizations, you will find out that this is a big mush that is being thrown out just to be able to attract people to apply and recruit them. But the day they are recruited, these value propositions are totally forgotten in the organization. So if you continue to work with those kind of employer value propositions, no longer will you be able to retain. Maybe you're able to fool talent into joining you, but your ability to retain that talent in the long run is not going to be very there. So therefore, it is very, very important how you design. First of all, be clear, study your organization well, identify what is it that is actually the value proposition your organization uniquely brings on the table, highlight it, broadcast it, and then get the talent. But once he comes in, ensure that you execute that for the talent you've identified. Another important thing on the placement front, and I have seen, is we make a big song and dance about selecting the people and say, oh, he's such a talented guy. But when he comes into the organization, we put the talented guy into doing a mundane job, which he gets so bored that forget his talent, he wants to run away. Forget displaying the talent. He does not want to continue in that assignment because we recruited him for that talent, but we placed him into doing a job which was so mundane and routine that talent feels it is totally misplaced and not recognized. So critical is that HR departments really get into research now. Most HR guys have not realized the value of research, and therefore value of organizational research, going into the people, connecting with them, understanding them, identifying them, sitting with people in universities, sitting with the millennials, talking to them instead of sitting and making those homily presentations and projections about what the future talent will require. That is certainly not going to be helping at all. As I said, ERP is very, very critical, and therefore, if you want to really bring talented edge in your organization, unless you have an ERP which captures massive data about talent, your ability to do talent intelligence will be impaired. And if your ability to do talent intelligence is impaired, naturally you will not be able to do any programs which will have meaningful implication for talent in the organization. Careers. Everyone says that, oh, we offer careers, but most of the people in any of the employee satisfaction surveys you will see, most people leave because of career blues. They do not see a direction. They do not believe the organization believes. Most companies do what we call the last day career management. Let a person put a resignation letter, and suddenly the entire imaginary career management program comes into action. Suddenly the person who has put in a resignation is the most wanted person in the company, and all the company will collapse if this guy will go away on the last day, of course. Until then he has been treated like bloody shit. I'm sorry, I'm using wrong word. He's been treated horribly, but suddenly he becomes a hero when he resigns. And this is the kind of career management programs that we drive, and this is what is not going to help us in the future. Because future is going to require you engaging with the people who you consider talented, telling them that what kind of career aspirations they should have, understanding what kind of exposures that they are looking out for, and offering them those career opportunities. That is the only way talented people will be retained in the organization. You will have to guide them, you will have to handhold them. And this is where the criticality of coaching and mentoring comes in. Because unless and until they see you as their mentors who are genuinely committed to them, this so-called verbal mentoring where some gray-haired guy like me sits together and just basically talks but doesn't do anything, he doesn't understand anything, that point of time it is not going to work. So critical is for organizations to develop a coaching and mentoring capability within itself, where there are people who are trained to be effective coaches, where people are trained to be effective mentors, and then they sit with these people who have been identified as talent and let that talent be coached and mentored by those kinds of people. One of the things that millennial organizations, or the future of the organization, or future of the talented people in your organization, is they are people who genuinely value effective governance. Look at what's happening to Infosys, and that's just an example. We don't have to comment on it. We have been all reading media reports on how governance is becoming critical. If you really, at this point of time, I believe so, get into that organization or such organizations and do a survey of people who are identified as talent and ask them what they feel, you will not get a very happy report on what they believe about it. Because most people now really genuinely want to work in organizations which are value-driven organizations. And which is why we have now moved away in the domain of OD about talking on values. We don't talk about values. In OD, we now talk about character. What is the difference between value and character? Value is something which is desirable. Every man has homilies of values: integrity, honesty, hard work, all of those values you have on the one hand. What is critical is, are these values put into action? So when values are put into action, they become character. So organizations need to have a character, not values that they aspire to have, but values which are seen by people in the organization as the practiced values, things that they believe that people and leaders and the organizational systems reflect. Those are the values. And if those values are the values for which they have joined an organization, they believe that if the organization does not have a character to live up to those expectations, they certainly don't want to be there. And certainly the last G, as I've told you, is organizations want, or talent wants, that organizations have meaningful germination process. Because in a gig economy, you are not able to really predict how long a person will want to be with you, what are his limitations, how does he want to look at life, what are the things he wants to do differently. Even if your organization structure requires certain jobs to be long drawn jobs, the person may be super fond of the job, but he may not be wanting to do the job so long. So therefore, an ongoing understanding of the reality and designing the germination process of the organization, where there is a structured succession plan created, that is one of the most important things. And when organizations have that, they're able to use the talent for the period that it is associated with that company far more meaningfully than those who are not even aware how long is the talent going to remain out there. So these, according to me, are some of the things that I wanted to share with this group. Times are changing, and that's not anything new. Everyone knows about it. We are living in a different world. We are living in a world where blended leadership is to be expected. There is no one leader who has all the competencies required for a successful inspirational leader. He brings in a few main important things, but alongside he brings in wisdom to know what are the missing gaps of competencies and is able to acquire those through a set of wise selection of team members who are supporting him in the process, and that's called blended leadership. He then has the wisdom to ensure that any cognitive dissonance or any competitive conflicting dissonance that may prevail is brought to its fore and resolved together as a team. They acquire team well, they develop their team well, they get value out of it, they bring good governance systems, they're able to guide well. And if you do that, it's only then you will be able to create a talent edge in the organization. Do not make the blunder of labeling all the people working in the organization as talent, and to say that I'm going to offer a talent program for everybody in the organization never works like that. One of the reasons that upsets talent is it being classified as the general people, part of that system, and not given a differentiated recognition. That itself is upsetting and cause of attrition and of talent in that organization. So these are some of my thoughts. I hope you got some value out of it. Of course, you can write into me. I'm available on LinkedIn. My email ID is adiljmalia@gmail.com. You can catch me on my LinkedIn handle, which is www.adilmalia. Write in, talk in, give me a call, whatever you want. Always available to support HR people for whatever challenges they have. So with that, I want to thank you. And if there are any questions, Shiv, I don't mind taking them.
Thank you so much, Adil. Now is the time for question and answer, friends. You can raise your hand with a icon. I'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask question to Adil. Yeah, I have one Manjunath from CGI. One, I'm going to unmute Manju. Yeah, Manju, can you hear? Hello, Manju. Hello, Manju, we can't hear you.
Are they keying in? They can key in.
Yes, I have unmuted him. Manju? Hello? Looks like there's some problem with the system. He's not able to speak.
You mean not able to connect?
Manju, can you hear now? Okay. While Manju is taking some time, anybody else has any questions for Adil? Yes, Manju, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes. Perfect.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I was not able to hear. So I have a simple question. Are there any best practices or best tools that you suggest to bring the right talent for the organization?
There are several tools, and this is again, my constant concern. We should not be talking about best practices. We should be talking about the next practices, because best practices are gone. Best practices only talk about the in-class kind of what some companies are doing. You need to understand the entire plethora of things which are available, identify and understand your organizational needs, and then put those programs in place, because there are 100 best practices today. For example, most of the companies are receiving CVs which are electronic versions, not of paper, but there are video CVs. Have you ever seen a video CV? Fantastic. Everyone can imagine what a video CV is about, but most people have not seen one video CV. You should go and see the video CVs. Now, for all international jobs of leadership, people have prepared proper scientific, with the help of some, I'm sure that there are agencies involved, because the kind of production values of those CV, if you look at it, you say, my God, this looks like a movie. Now that is where the world is going. Now, do you want to look at it? If you're looking at 3 CEOs to come into your company at the topmost level, there are those fantastic CVs that can be created. Have you had a look at that? So there are multiple practices you can. As I said, you could go to actually Instagram and try and pick up your CVs from. So what best practice in which domain? The entire talent acquisition is so wide that there are tons and tons of best practices. But predominantly get your ERP right, even from talent acquisition point of view, get your ERP right.
Okay, thanks, Anil. I have another question. What's your view on AI?
What's my view on AI?
AI with respect to talent acquisition.
Oh, fantastic. In fact, I believe that AI will be revolutionizing the entire talent acquisition process. Because number one is, other than the data, today, what is the problem we have? The problem we have is our ability to identify the right person who will fit into the culture and who will have a long-term stay with the company. Our problem is, number one is that people don't join us, or they join us for a short term and they leave us. And at times, after finding them to be superb by the best panel of interviewers, we find that on the day they join, 1 month down the line, we find them not the right person. Sorry, is there some disturbance?
No, Adil,
No,
yeah.
no, not from my end. Yeah.
So therefore, AI is supposed to be helping you by doing what we call predictive analysis, which means, do you have a set of people who within your culture have successfully done the job well? What are the competencies they reflected, and what are the cultural capabilities they indicated they had which made them succeed? The third element of simulation is, what is the changing environment and what will be expected of them. Therefore, you have a history of a role model, you have a culture which is a given, you have an entire new futuristic look at the organization and the culture it should be driving. At that point of time, AI will take data from one source, the success models, number two, your culture model competencies, third is the future challenges organizations will face. It will blend the three and throw up, number one, what are the kind of competencies and capabilities and attitudes you should be looking out for in your people who you select, who you believe will now be successful leaders of your future. So number one is the entire modeling. And the number two thing will be that AI will thereafter immediately do assessment of candidates and tell you how far are they from the desirable competencies or capabilities that you want. So on the one hand, a structured data-based, evidence-based analysis of what your entire hologram will look, and then assess the candidates who you have shortlisted on the basis of your interview to tell you, you like these three candidates. Now, from the AI intelligence perspective, this is your number one candidate, this is your number two and number three, because when we link up their capabilities to the desirable ones, this is what looks like. So it will revolutionize the entire process. I can only tell you that, these processes, once they come into place, the lower end of the HR jobs will not exist. I don't believe HR is ever going to lose its jobs. HR jobs are going to remain, but there are certain mundane jobs which are only logic-based jobs, and there are certain jobs which are very emotional, high-end, analytical jobs. So those jobs which are the low-end jobs, coordination jobs, getting the basic interview processes in place and all of this can go away, will go away. But the artistic jobs, the emotional jobs of HR, where you have to connect with your people, you have to be able to engage with them, those kinds of jobs which the machines won't be able to do, are the jobs which are the critical value adding jobs. So therefore, if you as an individual HR manager is developing yourself for the future, don't create specializations in these jobs which will be taken over by artificial intelligence. But those jobs which are totally emotional jobs, which appreciates, empathizes, gets the human quotient in place, gets to understand the emotionality and the support people will require in changing environment, helps them to identify possible future alternatives, guides them. Those kinds of jobs are the future jobs of HR. My reading of it, mastery jobs, artistic jobs will remain, scientific, logical jobs will be lost out.
Thank you.
Welcome. Shiv?
Great, thanks, Manju,
Thank
for
you,
the
sir.
question, and it was really helpful answer. So, anyone else has any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Any other questions?
I have so
Not
confused
seen
them
any
till
hands
no
so far.
questions. I don't know if I've convinced them or confused them.
Okay. So the entire webinar series is going to be recorded and very soon going to be uploaded in our GWFM YouTube channel. We'll share you the presentation and also the video link. Feel free to view it again, one more time, and feel free to share it with your network, friends, or within your organization's team members. Um, since there are no questions, so I think we can wind up, Adil. Thank you so much for your time, and it's really fortunate to have you with us in GWFM.
So Shiv, thank
And
you very much. And thank you all friends for being part of this journey of learning. As I said, Happy New Year to you, Happy Diwali to you. And never forget the fact that talent is the only source of creating all wealth. So Dhanteras really comes from people. So good luck to you, and may you start treating your talent far more effectively. Are we through?
fantastic. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I think there's some voice problem, audio problem. Could you just repeat that, Adil? What are you mentioning?
No, so what I was saying, much for attending this webinar. It was a pleasure to talk to you about how to create a talent edge. Happy Diwali. And may you never forget that the source of all wealth and prosperity creation is human beings and talent. So therefore, continue to treat your talent far more effectively, and you will be happier and a more effective leader. Good luck to you.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much, Adil. And friends, thank you so much for taking time out on Friday. Thanks for joining us. Hope to catch up with you soon. You'll have the video and also presentation very soon. Feel free to reach us if you need any details. Thank you so much. Thanks, Adil, for your time again.
Pleasure.
Happy Diwali in advance, friends. Happy
And
Diwali in
Diwali to
advance
all of you.
to all
Thank
of
you very
you.
much. Thank you very much.